Hello, dear friends. Today we continue our acquaintance with the memoirs of Waffen SS Major General Kurt Meyer. Don't forget to rate the video and leave your opinion about this material. Well, let's begin. The Russians were covered by fire from all types of weapons, and terrible gaps formed in their ranks. Our mortars and field guns tried to destroy the enemy's guns with accurate fire. The attacking Russian chains lay down. Then they jumped up and ran forward to their deaths. Officers and commissars tried to resume the attack, but I saw only a few Russian soldiers running forward. Most remained lying on the ground as if they were nailed down. The moment had come for the motorcyclists and armored vehicles waiting for their chance on the flanks. They moved eastward, then turned and drove the Russians toward our positions. By midday, we had captured 650 men and killed more than 200. According to the prisoner's testimony, the commander of the 962nd Rifle Regiment shot himself after shooting one of his officers. Since this regiment originally had only 900 soldiers, it was practically wiped out as a result of the losses it suffered. Over the next few hours, we were attacked several more times. In the afternoon, heavy artillery fire was directed at the village. It came from the west. Although we expected an attack from both directions, this strike still took us by surprise. In the blink of an eye, the front line changed, and we took up pre-prepared positions west of the village. Unlike the first attack, this one was carried out by motorized forces. Several light amphibious tanks, these were obsolete T-38 light tanks, and armored vehicles formed the Russian vanguard. The Russian artillery strike hit the position of our battery, where a truck carrying ammunition exploded. We let the Russians get closer again, and they again ran into our concentrated fire. The amphibious tanks were the first victims. They were blown up. Black clouds of smoke covered the battlefield, while our armored vehicles and tank destroyers moved forward. They fired at the partially scattered Russian battle formations. One of our tank destroyers stopped and started smoking. Red tongues of flame burst out from inside and engulfed the driver before he could be rescued. Two other crew members were pulled out of the fiery hell, and the flames were extinguished. My ears were ringing from the screams of the badly wounded driver burning alive. However, I tore my gaze away from the burning tank destroyer and pointed my binoculars to the southwest. Clouds of thick dust heralded the arrival of new columns of Russian troops trying to break through to the east. Our armored cars and tank destroyers, like panthers, pounced on these columns and shot at the vehicles, turning them into burning wrecks. Russian soldiers tried to scatter in all directions, but only a few managed to escape. Most of the attackers soon had to trudge along the road leading to captivity. During the debriefing, I heard the cries of the wounded and the heart-rending screams of our burned comrade. He was lying on a stretcher and begging me to finish him off. His burned hands lay on his charred body. His hairless head, sunken lips, and blackened torso were one continuous wound. The lower part of his body was protected from the fire by his trousers, and therefore did not suffer as much. I felt disgusting and could not utter a word of comfort. In such a situation, they would have been a shameless lie. My soldiers stared at me intently. Again and again, the young soldier begged for relief from his suffering. The doctor said there was no hope. He couldn't even see where to inject the painkiller. The doctor could only shrug his shoulders helplessly. A blood-curdling scream drove me out of the field dressing station. I was unable to say goodbye. I couldn't even put my hand on his forehead. One last glance, and I ran out. With the end of the day came the end of our comrade's life. We held the village of Zasai, repelling Russian attacks until August 17th, and conducted reconnaissance far to the south, all the way to Snegirievka. At 7 o'clock in the evening, it was reported that the Snigirievka station had been cleared of the enemy. SS Untersturmführer Tede's armored car was hit by a shell from an anti-tank gun. It was reported that Tede was missing in action. Just a few hours earlier, Tede had learned of the birth of his first child. The 16th Panzer Division managed to capture the city of Nikolaev and push the Russians back to Kherson. In Nikolaev, the defeated Grenadiers discovered a battleship under construction with a displacement of 36,000 tons, which had not yet left the slipway. On August 18th, our battalion was tasked with conducting reconnaissance in the direction of Kherson. This city had developed particularly rapidly since the end of the 19th century and in the 1930s. However, on our maps, it was marked as a poor village. Long before dawn, we moved south. A few hours later, the shining red face of the sun rose above the Dnieper and warmed our stiff joints. Clouds of dust swirled behind us as we moved forward quickly. A group of motorcyclists, covered by 2 armored vehicles, rode ahead. The rest of the 1st Platoon and my command armored vehicle followed behind them. The commander of the vanguard was SS Hauptsturmführer Erich, whom I could rely on. After a short time, we came across a Russian column that was looking for a ford. We disarmed them and sent them in the direction of Zasyel. The Russian trucks were taken as trophies and joined our column. The prisoners were glad that the war was over for them and willingly obeyed orders. On both sides of our route, we found huge vineyards and fields of tomatoes and cucumbers. Soon, the entire battalion was eagerly devouring tomatoes. Orchards covered the western slopes of the Dnieper Valley, but the fruit was not yet ripe. Our advance southward continued. My soldiers smiled at me as I drove past them or relayed radio messages to me. As experienced people, they had, of course, noticed that we were not conducting reconnaissance at that moment, but simply resting. In Wehrmacht reports, such actions were referred to as surprise attacks, but this surprise attack was far from the brainchild of a rash or reckless commander. No. In most cases, a surprise attack was an operation planned in advance by a responsible commander. Such a commander was in control of the situation and was eager to achieve great success through cool-headed planning, fearlessness, and courage, and quick action. In addition to military abilities, outstanding human qualities were a necessary condition for this type of combat operation. The commander must enjoy the absolute trust of his soldiers and be, in the true sense of the word, the combat leader of his unit or division. The order to launch a sudden strike cannot be given from above. The general staff does not have the ability to give orders on the actual battlefield based on conclusions suggested by intuition. The prerogative to launch a surprise attack belongs exclusively and entirely to the combat commander himself. Often, a lightning-fast operation seems like recklessness on the part of a commander who is accompanied by luck, but there is another side to reality. Such a commander literally puts himself in the enemy's shoes. He is aware of the failures and setbacks suffered by the enemy. He is familiar with the physical and mental stress experienced by the enemy. He knows his strengths and weaknesses well. He does not rely on intelligence reports from higher authorities. They only provide a general overview of the situation and the balance of forces in the current operation, and nothing more. The combat commander develops his own assessment of the situation. From thousands of bits of information, he forms a picture of the enemy. He can read the operational situation on the ground like a book. His deeply hidden instincts as a hunter and warrior are awakened. Such a commander sees and senses the enemy. The faces of prisoners reveal more to him than the pages of interrogations. A combat commander is not only a superior officer, but a person who leads by example. His will is the will of his soldiers. He draws his strength from his grenadiers, who believe in him and will follow him even to hell. The outlines of Kherson were already visible on the horizon. Grain elevators towered over the Dnieper. The western part of the city was dotted with tall factory chimneys. Shady, inviting trees loomed before us. The scorching sun burned us. We dreamed of water and shade in the city. A few kilometers from Kherson, I stood for a long time on the armored vehicle and looked at the city stretching out before my eyes. On the Dnieper, which flowed here from east to west, there was lively ship traffic, with gunboats scurrying back and forth. Large steam ferries lazily made their way to the far shore, where they unloaded their cargo and returned to Kherson. The city seemed to be within arm's reach. It was tempting, beckoning, and seemed to be laughing at my indecision. The company officers looked at me expectantly. The artilleryman's face showed that he had already determined the positions from which he would provide fire support for the battalion's advance. At that moment, my soldiers were sitting in the tomato fields again, happily eating the wonderful fruit. I envied their carefree attitude. I lit another cigarette, blowing smoke into the shimmering air. I felt completely confident and had no bad premonitions that the huge city could swallow us up. My decision was firm. The city had to fall under a sudden attack. The Russians were expecting an attack from the northwest from Nikolaev. They had prepared their defenses in that direction. That was where the Leibstandarte division was ready to attack. We drove to the city along a country road along the Dnieper and immediately crushed a company of Red Army soldiers who were erecting a barricade in the suburbs of the city. Taken by surprise, the Red Army soldiers forgot to swap their shovels for weapons. But then, modern, multi-story buildings appeared before us. An enemy machine gun tore up the ground around us. The battle for Kherson had begun. That's all for today. If you liked the video, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. See you all soon.